Hello and welcome to the Dailies, your morning programs that keep you updated with all that is happening from Nigeria, from our Nigerian newspaper. I am Sela Elisha Dasham and I'll be doing the program alongside Rachel Tanzi. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning, Sela.
Alright, we are live on Facebook and on YouTube. You can follow us live there while we look at the stories that are trending from our papers this morning. We will be starting with the first newspaper.
A Papa-led Labour Party gives Peter Obi 48 hours to clarify identity or risk suspension. The big story on the paper, Nadeco dissents on Senate President Akpabio, asks him to resign or risk impeachment for high-handedness, lacking empathy for Nigerians, slams Senate President's leadership style. Electricity subsidy gulp 135 billion naira in 3 months, a report coming from the federal government. Tinubu appoints Aliyu Aparadu as ICPC chairman and secretary. Uproar in Senate as Indume tackles Akpabio, storms out in anger. Lawmakers go into executive session. COVID-19 intervention funds reps probe mismanagement of disbursed 183.9 billion naira. Retired DIG sues police commission, demands reinstatement in 550 million naira damages. Aiyedatiwa's impeachment saga, although assembly agrees to cease fire. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
Alright, let's take a look at Nigerian News Direct, where we have Ondo lawmakers agree to cease fire on impeaching embattled deputy governor, with detail found on page 4. MEDA resumes as NCC EVC to prioritize improvement of quality of service. The big story on subsidy palliative labor demand transparency as federal government begin disbursement of 25,000 to households, with the rider saying 15 million households to benefit from 1 trillion naira conditional cash transfer for 3 months. You can find detail of the story inside. Cash transfer crucial in helping overcome initial hardship period, coming from the World Bank. Organized labor demand speedy implementation of Memorandum of Understanding. All the story can be found on page 4. And on license renewal, NIMC suspend NIN enrollment by partners. You can find more of that on page 2. And on UNN certificate scandal, Labour Party threatened to suspend Peter Obi. You can find more on page 4. And on inflation, sorry, food prices diminishing purchasing power push Nigerians to the brink, where we find more detail on page 2. Yesterday we saw the inflation for September, which is about 26.72%. You can find detail of that story on page 2. And on wealth management, financial expert urge SMEs to embrace discipline, consistency as UBA business series. You can find more inside the paper. We have a picture story where we can see the governor of Lagos State. You can do well to grab the paper and see more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On the Nigeria Standard, FEC approves implementation of agreement with labor unions. You can find details on page 2. SA may overtake Nigeria as Africa's biggest economy. Boost for Naira as Nigeria receive World Bank loan. You can find details on page 2. PO applauds rural women in food production. The big story on the paper, no plan to stifle press freedom, coming from the federal government. You can find details on page 2. Exhibit Plateau spirit of love, friendship and tolerance, coming from Governor Mutfang. You can find the details of his statement on the front page and continue on page 2. And that's all the news on the Nigeria Standard.
And on Daily Independent newspaper, AMCON clarifies secondment of ARIC Air staff to NG Eagle. Our members not complaining, coming from the NAAPE. Eric Air Fleet displayed to 2 aircraft. You can find detail on the front page and continue in the paper. Obi not Tinubu won the 2023 presidential poll, says the ex-SGF Babachir Lawan, with the rider Babachir still nursing bitterness of a failed joint ticket dream with Tinubu, says the APC. The big story on the paper is still talking about the cash transfer, where the federal government cash transfer target 15 million households to go up 1.125 trillion naira, with detail on the front page and more inside the paper. Labour Party tackles federal government over 57.6 billion naira SUV for 360 reps member. And on November 11, Guba polls, INEC raises concern over the numbers of litigation. More of that story can be found on page 29. We've seen that over the years, even the judiciary complain about the numbers of cases coming in the court. So you can find more of the judicial cases that are in court on page 29. Also still on Daily Independent newspaper, we have South Africa set to topple Nigeria as Africa's largest economy. This is coming from the IMF, where we see that South Africa is part of world powers, BRICS and all of that. And we're seeing that they have actually defeated Nigeria in becoming the largest African economy. You can find more detail of how we can actually upgrade and also become part of Africa's largest economy. Tinubu appoint Aliyu new ICPC chairman, Obarodo secretary, engages Ahmed Arabi as chairman of National Hajj Commission, with detail found on page 7. AGF African Development Bank to unlock $5 billion financing for women in the SMEs, unveil Nigeria's Afamwa finance series. You can find more of that on page 6. We have senators take side as Senate President Akpabio and Ndume clash, where there was an issue yesterday during the plenary so you can do well to find what actually transpired and what called to that, where we are seeing Ndume is calling for the correction of something whereby the Senate President is refusing. So you can do well to find more detail of that story inside the paper. And I think it's important, Rachel, we look a little about the cash transfer the federal government did to 50 million. Yesterday was when the conditional cash transfer. We will remember that the Minister for Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Elevation, Beth Edu, said the fact that the government is looking at how they can start the initial elevation of poverty with the hardship that a lot of Nigerians are going through, especially the poor and the vulnerable, during the removal of the fuel subsidy. And we know that they said they will be giving 25,000 naira to 50 million households, mostly widows, the poor, vulnerable, people who actually cannot fend for themselves. But the question that always comes to my mind whenever I say cash transfer being given to Nigerians, and what I'm concerned is the fact that this is supposed to run for 3 months, Rachel. So right now, for every 25,000 naira that you get every month, so 25 times 3, we're talking about 75,000 or thereabout. Now, what do we expect Nigerians to do with 75,000 naira when you give them cash? Because they were holding the check and snapping pictures yesterday. And the word is, how did they come about the poor and the vulnerable? Of course, I know there is a social register, so it's expected that it's with that register that they will go through to know what you earn, what you don't have, and how they can actually meet up. But over the years, concern for Nigerians have been, why don't you teach Nigerians how to fish rather than giving them the fish that might not last long? Because a lot of people want to be empowered. A lot of people want to have a steady job that brings in more food every day, and not just something that comes in and then we're still having the issue of the end power. Starting from next month is when they will be auditing, and then people who have not been paid over the years or for the past 1 year or 2 years will actually get their pay. So a lot of, yes, I know this is a move the federal government feel it's a better way, but then we're still having the issue of the money that was supposed to be sent to the 36 states, including the FCT, that till date we do not know how many people got access to the loan that was given to the government, and also the truck of grains that is supposed to come into the country. So right now, I just hope the federal government actually have a better plan after this 25,000 naira that will be rolling for 3 months, because if the money is starting from October, then that means it's stopping in December. So what happened when we enter 2024 from January? What then will be the next line of action? Because when we keep giving people little cash, and then they do not have a stable job, I mean, 25,000 cannot take a household of even 6 through the month. So I'm hoping that there will be a better way, the coming from the government, on actually tackling poverty and also elevating a lot of people from where they are presently.
Sally, when you see the government not doing things the way it's supposed to be, then you just have no option but just to allow them do it. I mean, we can't do anything about the way the government is going about these things, because why is it even analog in the first place? Why are people snapping with check of money as if it's a lottery of billions of naira, and it's just household money that it's not even supposed to be like that in the first place? You have the statistics of people who are low income earners in the country. You have them working in ministries either at the state level or the local government level or at the federal government level. I believe that everybody is feeling the hardship in Nigeria. No doubt, I can't say nobody don't deserve an extra 25,000. It might not be much, but it will add up to whatever you will be taking home at the end of the day. However, if you are looking at 15 million households, then it has to be households. But when you make it a headcount where people go and collect this money, then the aim is being defeated, because most people from households are people that already are employed. We have parents working, whether at the local government area, the state, or the federal government. They are in different offices. These are the data you're supposed to use to give this money to households, so that you'll be able to be the people that the demographic you'll be able to work with are those that are earning very, very low. And then these are the people, because it's all about poverty elevation. And then you have to really look at the poor, because when you are employed, if you are single, it reflects. If you have a family, it shows with the number of children, it shows, and all of that. And then you will know the number of a household based on your data, based on your registrar, depending on where you are working and regardless of the level. And I thought that this was how the federal government was going to go about it, to be able to target the poor people in the country. But if they're going about it this way, then we just have to sit down and wait and see if this money will really go to households, or we will just end up having individuals getting this money, and perhaps in the end you would have over 4 members in a household getting this money, where at least it could have been spread out more appropriately. But then we'll just wait and see. In the end, the aim is to see that at the end of the day, the government meets this number of people, and truly this palliative will go out and help. It's not much, but adding up to what you already have, 25,000 can go a little long way, not very long, but it will do a little difference. For 3 months, it will.
Just applaud the government for this.
Yes.
It is very great move. And I think that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Voice of Liberty, Senate in uproar as Indume storms out of chamber. EFCC chair CBN governor incarceration without trial. Ex-minister writes AGF on Gestapo manner of removal. We are committed to reducing cost of governance. Our 130 million naira Toyota Prado SUVs are work tools. A statement coming from the reps. The big story on the paper: Tinubu launches conditional cash transfer for 15 million households. President Bola Tinubu yesterday launched the renewed Hope Conditional Cash Transfer (CCT) for 15 million households across the country. And in Akwa Ibom, son hacks mother to death over food. Allocate part of fuel subsidy to enroll Nigerians in NHIS, reps ask Tinubu. Serap to file injunction against lawmakers' purchase of SUVs. And at the downside of the paper, blue economy reforms, anxiety grips MPA management and workers as Port Harbour bills kill third reading as Senate. And that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
On the Nation newspaper, Labour Party tells its federal lawmakers to reject official vehicles. You can find detail on page 3. Court issues arrest warrant for ex-Ondo Deputy Governor. Abeokuta Ota road to become world-class, says Ogun government. You can find detail of both stories on page 27 and on page 6. President appoint healthman for ICPC NIDCOM PTDF. You can find detail on page 6. 84 million living in poverty not acceptable to Tinubu. We will give Nigerians decent work, sustain social protection, And then another rider says 25,000 naira cash transfer begins. We have a caption here that say, I urge Nigerians to key into all the available programs because they are here to help. I guess this is coming from the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. You can find more detail of the story on page 4. African Development Bank ADF to breach $42 billion financing gap for SMEs. Illegal exportation of gold and other solid minerals gone, says the president. Alake, we will stimulate investment. You can find detail on the front page and inside the paper. Senate seeks declaration of emergency on nicotine use and others, with detail of that story found inside the paper. We have the picture story here showing us Beth Edu while she was actually giving the check of the 25,000 naira that will be given to the 50 million house. So we can see one of the beneficiaries over there snapping a picture. And that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On New Telegraph, CBN to penalize bank for MICR reject. This is on checks, and we have INE Naira plunges to record low at 848.12 Naira to a dollar. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 27. Israel-Hamas conflict, more revenue for Nigeria as cooking gas price soars over 40%. Exported products rejected by EU causing Nigeria huge shame, a statement coming from NAFDAC. 57.6 billion naira car gift to National Assembly members, insensitive waste of resources, coming from Labour Party. Protest in Abuja over choice of EFCC chair. Alleged 7.9 billion naira fraud, court reschedules ex-aviation minister Odua's trial for November 14. The big story on the paper, Bayelsa Imo Kogi Guba, court orders hindering our preparations. Statement coming from INEC. Says commission dealing with over 11 pre-poll court orders. There's uncertainty over participating candidates. Parties blame challenges on lack of internal party democracy. You can find all the details on page 3. And on Gaza war, NSCIA seeks end to hostilities, Nigeria's support for Palestine. You can find more details on page 29. Babachi Lawa tackles Tinubu, says Obi won 2023 presidential election. Federal government to spend over 15 billion naira to generate mineral data, coming from the minister. Tension in Senate as Chief Whip walks out of plenary. I went to ease myself, statement coming from Indume. You can find more details on page 2. And from IMF, South Africa may overtake Nigeria as continent's bigger economy. You can find more details on page 2 and 6. Another downside of the paper, we have a study that says Germicidal UV light can produce indoor pollutants. You can find more details on page 27, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
Take a look at the Daily Times newspaper. Lagos, Kaduna generate enough IGR as state cumulative revenue hit 6.6 trillion naira. This is the report you can find inside the paper, where we have a rider following says Rivers, Lagos, Anambra top fiscal performance ranking as Zamfara, Bayelsa, Benue lead from the bottom. You can find more detail of the story inside the paper. Huge row in Senate between Ndume and Akpabio. Carry verbal exchange from plenary to executive session. Chief Whip storm out of chamber in fury and then accuses Akpabio for disrespect for rules. You can find more detail of what those rules are on page 2. Resigned due to fallout from OPQ background, ex-SGF Lawan tells Tinubu. Claims Obi came first, Tinubu third in February presidential poll. We will react shortly, APC says, and another writer here said the matter of who won is sub juice. You can find more of that on site the paper. Governor launches appeal court for sacking senator from his seat. You can find that. Governor launches appeal court for sacking senator from his state. You can find detail of the story in the paper. Don't accommodate sell land to criminals. Legislators warn Bauchi and loyal fathers. Labour Party flays 160 million naira car gift to lawmakers. You can find in the paper as well. Governor's intervention over face-off among Akwa Ibom traditional rulers fails, with detail found inside the paper. We're still having pictures of the people who benefited from the 25,000 naira being given. You can do well to grab the Daily Times and read more detail of stories of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, 26 trillion naira 2024 budget proposal still reflects economy's heavy dependence on oil, statement coming from an expert. Prioritized budget on infrastructure, power and security. An advice coming from CPPE. You can find details on page 7. Tinubu flags of cash transfer program for 15 million households. Israel-Palestine conflict stop the war in Gaza now. Statement coming from NSCIA. UBA Business Series expert emphasized discipline consistency as hope for wealth management. Reps probe MDA's overutilization of 100 billion naira COVID-19 intervention fund. The big story on the paper, APC halt on the deputy governor's impeachment process meets with lawmakers. Akeredolu rules out return to Germany for treatment. You can find details on page 5. Tinubu names Aliyu Arabi as ICPC and NACON chairman. You can find more details on page 5. Troops apprehend 59 suspected criminals in Plateau, Bauchi and Kaduna State. Police bust illegal arms manufacturing company in Lagos and arrest 2. Storm in Senate as Indume walks out over clash with Akpabio. Drama over point of order. You can find more details on page 8 and other stories inside the paper, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
And on the Punch newspaper, Tinubu ministers face first assessment January. You can find detail of that assessment on page 26. It is important that they check on their performance quarterly so we know that whether they are worthy of the seat they're giving or they need to be removed. You can find detail on page 26. Protesters storm National Assembly, oppose EFCC chair's confirmation, with detail found on page 7. Why I want 550 million naira damages for compulsory retirement. This is coming from the ex-DIG. The big story on 35,000 naira wage award. Labour gives governors ultimatum. 61 million Nigerians to get 1 trillion naira. With the rider ultimatum gives by NLC TUC applicable to states, Kano, Gombe, NLC chapters and others. 50 million households to get 25,000 naira monthly program will reduce poverty, says the World Bank. You can find more detail of that story on page 2. Free Israeli hostages, France, Turkey urge Hamas. You can find detail of that story on page 7. Ondo lawmakers made Gandoji suspend Aiyedatiwa impeachment, with detail on page 8. Many feared kill as Oyo security agent headers clash, with detail found on page 7. This is really sad, where we're still having the issue of headers actually coming in to confront security agency. We hope that something will be done as quick as possible to be able to avoid all of these things having a reputation again. We're having a picture story here where we see 14 injured as 2 BRT vehicles collide in Lagos. We've seen the damages and we hope that nobody died eventually, and this should call for more caution and patience coming from drivers. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Daily Sun, Obi won presidential election, not Tinubu. Ex-SGF Babachilawa. APC hits back, says he is peddling gibberish. You can find more details on page 27. Storm in Senate as Indume SP Akpabio reeve deepens. Chief Whip stages walkout to protest Senate President out of order ruling. Upper Legislative Chamber hurriedly goes into executive session. You can find details on page 6. Biden visits Israel today as Gaza humanitarian crisis worsens to meet Jordan, Palestinian, Egyptian leaders. South Africa Hamas leader hold talks over aid. You can find more details on page 25. Port Harcourt refinery repair unrest, spare parts mismatch threatens December target. Abia government denies asking northerners at Lopanta cattle market to leave, insists there won't be residential section of market. You can find details on page 4. Tension in Imo Bauchi as government kill 9 vigilantes and deputy registrar. Ojikalu Northern Group expect justice fairness at appeal court. You can find details on page 25. 63% of Nigerians living in poverty, a statement coming from the Minister of Finance. President launches cash transfer program for 15 million as palliative. We're not responsible for violence in Southeast, a statement coming from IPOB. You can find more details on page 27, and these are the major highlights on Daily Sun newspaper.
Right, Richard, I think the spirit, attention in Imo Bauchi as gunmen kill 9 vigilantes and deputy registrar. It really calls for, like say, a pause to know what really is happening. We just saw that even on the punch paper where many were feared killed because of a clash between herders and security operative. And now again, we are still seeing the Daily Sun is getting the fact that we're actually capturing the story, the extension in Imo. And we know ever since the election, there tend to be fire on the mountain in Imo State. You tend to wonder what is so peculiar, so special about Imo State that it seems to be unrest, even though Kogi and also Bayelsa are having pocket of unrest here and there. But I think this should be a time for caution for all of this thing. Whatever the issue is, if you're talking about headers clash, then I think headers should know where their boundary is so we don't have anything, because the issue of oil was the fact that herders allowed their cattle into people's farm. And you remember when we were complaining, a lot of farmers are complaining the fact that they don't even have bumper harvest this year, either because of pests or because of weeds have actually destroyed their crops. And then imagine just after you are happy to go have harvest, and then you are just before you are cattle that are actually eating your foodstuff. It's very, very disheartening. So we hope that there will be a round table sitting, even though I think here in Plateau State we've had time where herders and farmers are being called together to round table. But we hope that this don't keep repeating itself, because these are things that can instigate violence, and then we see that unrest from one state to another. Already the southeast, the governors are already going through a lot trying to keep peace and calm in the state. So having another unrest coming from clash, I hope that more will be done. Also for our vigilantes, I just hope that more protection will be provided for them, because they tend to be at the mercies of these people who tend to be armed. Some of these herders actually have some armors with them. They walk around fully armed. So we hope that more will be provided for the vigilantes. If they are working to make sure that there's peace, then I think that it's really important that they are giving whatever support and aid they need to be able to keep their communities and also to keep the state safe as well.
One thing is for sure that over the years we've seen how insensitive herders are. We know what these cattle need to feed on, and of course they don't need to eat anybody's crop. So it's expected of you as a herdsman to make sure that your cattle don't create any damage to anybody's farm. They don't eat the crops. Well, we've seen that kind of thing when it comes to maize crop, and has been the reason that have led to many clashes in communities. And we've seen how deadly these have become in the past years, where herders have killed farmers on their farmlands and all of that. I believe that it's just about doing the necessary things. I know the government kept on moving for grazing with the past administration. We saw the Buhari's administration moving for grazing land given to these herders in states, and of course we had state governors that did not agree to that and moving for ranching, where you can have a secluded way of growing these cattle. And you know, Sela, it's amazing how we refuse to adopt things that are supposed to take us to the next level as a country when it comes to agriculture, because countries that are having a lot of beef in excess and meat are not into free grazing. It's ranching, and they have different method in which they grow these cattle within a short period of time and be able to have it for meat. But then if we are choosing the nomadic way of rearing our cattle and moving from one place to another, then it is very essential for the government to tighten up security so that farmers and herders will not be having any clash. But over the years we've seen that for some reason we are having the herders having taken full authority and causing whatsoever havoc they want to cause, and farmers being left with without no mouth to talk, or you can't even say anything about it, or it's your life. That has been the situation in the country. But then it's all about the government tackling it, because there's little or nothing farmers can do, because they don't have weapons, they don't have cutlass. While we see these herders moving with weapons, and even in the main city, not only in the village, I don't feel comfortable seeing them or moving close to them, because it's almost like they are unapproachable, and you know that what this is what they can do to you if you try to confront them. Then we're looking at people who are in rural areas, far away from where they can call out for help, going through something like this. It's all about the community waking up. We're seeing what the vigilantes are going through. They need some kind of licensing to be able to have access to weapons also, because if they are being attacked, then they should be able to protect themselves in one way. And even if it is the community policing, then also the state government alongside the federal government, there's nothing like too much security. Is all about bringing out policies and regulations, things to be able to guide certain body, giving them their jurisdiction, what they can do and what they can't do, their area of function, what they can step in, matters they can step into, and matters they should be able to step into. It's all about doing the needful concerning security, and until we are ready to do all of that, to put in the right things in place, I believe we will keep seeing this clash, and then it's really a sad one for farmers.
So we hope that all of these matters or issues are being looked into, so we can actually have a Nigeria that, regardless of your religion, where you're coming from, you can all stay in peace without being afraid. When you see cattle approaching, you feel there's danger approaching you. Well, I think let's take a break at this moment so we can open the phone lines for our callers. When we come back, we will continue with the paper analysis. Please stay tuned with us. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies on your winning station. We have been looking at a number of stories that are trending on the paper. We've seen the 25,000 naira that will be shared to 50 million household. We're seeing also that they have been already giving out the fact that there will be an arrest for the deputy governor of Ondo State, and many other stories are on the front page of the paper. We would love to hear what your own side will be, what your contribution is concerning the stories that are trending on the paper. The number is on your screen. Remember to turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us, or try to summarize your point in a minute. I still have Rachel Tansey with me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at this day newspaper before the calls roll in. Sheitima saying strategic partnership between Nigeria and China key to Africa's development. We will remember he's out of the country to represent the president, with the writer here says Tinubu's foreign policy drive boosting investors' confidence. You can find more detail of that story on page 16. Declare emergency on drugs nicotine abuse in Nigeria. Senate urges the president, with detail found on page 34. US President Biden visit Israel today as hundreds die in Gaza hospital bombings. You can start reading more detail of the international story on the front page and continue on page 16. Federal government subsidy on electricity returns now 135 billion naira in the second quarter, with the writer saying Nigeria needs about $262 billion investment to meet 30,000 megawatts power generation target by 2030. We have a picture story here where we are seeing the women are here, where the women are trying to take up their place in nation building. You can do well to find more detail in the paper. Also, Obi won 2023 presidential poll. Tinubu came distant third. So you can find why that accusation or that allegation on page 36 of this day newspaper. And that's all on this day newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, Army naps IPOP ESN artillery launchers. You can find more details on page 4. Reps probe expenditure of COVID-19 intervention funds. Senate in rowdy session over procedural errors as Indume protests. National reorientation core of renewed hope agenda. This is coming from Malagi. You can find details on page 6. And on impeachment, Ganduji brokers truce in Ondo Assembly, Ayedatiwa face-off. Lawmakers suspend move against Deputy Governor, APC Chair Masari, Hill stakeholders urge political solution. You can find details on page 6. Tinubu launches cash transfer program for 50 million households. Poverty keg of gunpowder says better Edu. Tinubu names Adamu Aliyu ICPC chair, appoints Arabi as NACON boss. CJ weeps over killing of court registrar by bandits. This is in Niger.
Right, let's take this call. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Sele and Beto. Good morning. How are you?
You're fine, sir. Good morning.
It's your brother calling from Kaduna, Shama.
All right, please
Good
go
morning,
ahead,
Mr.
Mr. Shamal.
Honestly, the internal generating revenue, as I saw in the paper today, Lagos is talking while Kaduna is talking. But I want to assure Nigerians know that all this money that Kaduna State is having, infrastructure is on one side. With the loan the past governor collected, if you enter Kaduna, you appreciate some areas of Kaduna. If you come to the southern part of Kaduna, from the bridge down to the great southern part of Kaduna, you really can find a single road. The only road that Erufai wanted to make was a road that links a very vital road that connects the north, the south, and the north. And they started that construction road, they left it 30%, about 7% uncompleted. Then where is the challenge here? So we are making a lot of generation in Kaduna State, but the infrastructure is one-sided. We pray that a government that will come on board will also appear to the southern part of Kaduna, because they are proper enough to the hand of APC. The issue of the Senate working out of themselves, I don't know when our leaders will get it right. Let us for God's sake come together. Nigerians are the receiving end. We are the ones suffering. They only go there and share whatever they can share for their own benefit. But we are the ones suffering. Let them legislate on issues that will make Nigeria grow. Not to be going there to argue. They have their money already. Can you imagine the cars that were bought for House of Assembly members, 200 million naira, a purchase of a car? That 200 million can give a community, the whole of the community in Europe. But it's been given, used to buy a car, just for a person. 360 members, Nigerians, wake up. Our foolishness has been noticed. We have been taking advantage in this country. Good morning, my sisters.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Shamal, for your contribution.
Yes, and I believe that that's also a cry from someone in Kaduna pleading with the government not to be biased, that let this new administration develop Kaduna State equally, that no zone, no area should be neglected, because that was what they faced with the past administration. One side was taken care of and the other side of Kaduna was neglected. So I believe this is a cry on behalf of people in Kaduna coming from Mr. Shamal, that they need this present administration not to be biased in ruling, but to be able to develop the places that need development in Kaduna State, regardless of where you are coming from in Kaduna State as the governor. Still on Blueprint newspaper, in Niger State, CG weeps over killing of court registrar by bandits. I won't allow memos that will plunge Adamawa into bankruptcy. Fintiri once. You can find details on page 8, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper, starting with its big caption on 2023 general election overview, where we have 1,280 political officers were contested in the 2023, comprising one office of the president, 109 members of the Senate, 360 federal House of Representatives seat, 782 House of Assembly seat across the 28 states of the Federation, and then 28 governors' position contested. Then we have 1,209 of 1,280 political offices being challenged in the court. Now, part of the reason why INEC felt that would hinder them for proper preparation, we're having 94.4%, that is to say 1,209 petition before the judiciary for the petition. Then we have 600 pre-election cases handled by INEC alone, and we are having 3 billion naira budget earmarked for INEC to defend election disputes in court. And then we are seeing that the only time there have been no case in court was in 2015, the first time Nigeria presidential election did not head up in the court. And no wonder INEC is quite worried about all of this thing. But I remember a statement you said, Rachel, where you said this is the precaution or part of the reason. When you say let's meet in court, yes, you're bound to see all of this thing. But I do not think, to some large extent, that is my view, that the cases in court should stop INEC for preparing properly for the remaining 3 states that we have, because that will only tell Nigerians if INEC have truly turned a new leaf by what happened during the presidential election. Because we saw where PDP are saying that they hope that all of the things INEC said they will do. Talking about displaying of result electronically, making sure the beavers are working. We saw that they tested it on Saturday to be sure that everything is well taking care of, everything is working. But then looking at the fact that they need about 3 billion naira to earmark and defend the election dispute in court, when Nigerians are saying, what did you do with the money given to you to display the result electronically? And we didn't see that happening. So quite a number of things when you want to look at the review of the 2023 elections and some of the cases that are still in court. People are trying to say, this was my mandate, it's not your mandate, and all of that. So we just hope that INEC will not get distracted by all of the things that are happening.
I don't have a problem with INEC always bringing out all the problems that they are facing. However, if this 1,209 of 1,280 is not in Imo, Bayelsa, and Kogi State, then I believe that they should proceed, because these are results for states that were able to conduct election, and there are cases in court. While we have Kogi, I know when it comes to senatorial positions, I believe it was all uniform in the country, but then most of these cases are also for gubernatorial petitions and all of that. So regardless, I believe these are different offices, and there's nothing wrong for INEC to keep pointing out some of the challenges they are having and their concerns regarding the upcoming elections. However, I believe that even before the election, INEC had few court cases, of course not regarding the outcome, but there are a lot of petitions concerning questions on candidates, concerning certificates, concerning documents, some which INEC choose to wave, and then now is still biting them back and all of that. So for Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa, now aside insecurity, we're seeing INEC bringing up another concern. As long as these concerns won't totally stop these elections from going on, I believe INEC should go on with this election. Regardless of them bringing out all of this, they haven't stopped their preparation. They have gone on with doing everything that is needed to make the election possible. So I believe that when the dates come, we will see these elections holding in these various states.
Of course, INEC have a lot of fears, and I think maybe part of the fears, they hope that after these 3 states have the election, we'll not see another person coming from any of the states to say that it was my mandate that was given to someone. So our fingers are crossed. You can find more detail of that, where we're seeing INEC credibility sinks at 94% contesting polls await tribunal. You can find more detail of the big story on page 6. Where we're seeing Budge IT report shows state heavily dependent on federal allocation for budgets. More of that story can be found on page 3. Discordant tune persists over legality of appointing ministers of state. Also, we're seeing on the issue of subsidy, no alternative to local refining capacity. This is an editorial you can find on page 12. Uproar in Senate as Apabio Indume face off get messier, with detail found on page 6. Tinubu begins 1.125 trillion naira conditional cash transfer to 15 million household. Inflation may deter investors from rights issue as sixth firm raises 22 billion naira. You can find that business story on page 15. And the last story on the paper is House probe 183.9 billion naira COVID-19 intervention fund. You can find that news on page 3. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On leadership newspaper, Israel-Hamas war, NSCIA calls for ceasefire in Gaza. Salary verification, federal workers stranded in Abuja. And we have trending court sacks Abo as Adamawa North Senator, and numbers inflation rises to 26.72% from 25.80%. You can find both details of the story on page 2. Federal government pays 135 billion naira electricity subsidy to stop tariff hike. Abuja politicians back Aiyedati while weaken Akeredolu's influence. This is happening in Ondo State. Varsity autonomy, fear of high school fees grips parents and students. Government shifting responsibility, commercializing education. A statement coming from stakeholders says new fee regime burdensome, no tuition policy deceptive. I believe this is for government secondary schools, and ASU distances self from fee hike. Naira falls to lowest at 848 naira to a dollar at the official market. Aliyu Arabi emerged ICPC knock-on chiefs. No criminal recruited into police in Kano, says the CP. You can find more details on page 34. Federal government takes war against cervical cancer to 16 states. And that's all the news on leadership newspaper.
And on Nature News, we have Tinubu pledges commitment to sustainable mining development, with detail found on page 5 of Nature newspaper. Dangote pays sugarcane outgrowers 500 million naira. You can find that on page 3. Environment Minister Abbas Lawan resumed promises a cleaner and greener Nigeria. Detail found on page 3. Plastic pollution hinder Nigeria's international trade. This is coming from the NIS boss. We remember when we saw how we can actually take care of that, talking about recycling and then not littering the environment and the pollution that comes from burning of plastic. You can find more in the paper. And on World Food Day, we are having HOMEF and ERA FOEN calls for federal government action against hunger. You can find more of that on page 5. Squash and your health. You can find that also on page 20. 1.5 million homes in UK at risk of flooding from melting Eric ice. You can find that on page 28. GMO reiterates commitment to digitize maritime industry. You can find that on page 17. Minister spotlight importance of hand washing, especially now that the weather is getting quite dry. It is important that we maintain healthy hand washing. You can find that on page 6. IFRC launches 23 billion naira urgent appeal to elevate hunger crisis in Nigeria. You can find that on page 6. And we're having, coming from sport, we have cricket returns to Olympics after 128 years. You can find detail of that story also on page 21. And that's all on Nature newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Joshua Wilder but delayed. We have invited Lawal fans tell Pissarro after Sport Extra report. Also warned Abubulu Asigwe Okonko Obasogi in Eagles. Inter pounder in NHL swoop, and then you can find more details on page 6. Messi tip to win Ballon d'Or, you can find details on page 5. Nigerians craving AFCON title coming from the coach, you can find details on page 6. Usman eyes 2 UFC titles. Thiago Silva undecided over Chelsea future. Ten Hag welcomes Radcliffe overhaul. Citizens still keen on Eze. The big story saying, can these Eagles do it? I believe this is a caption coming out from the t-shirt of Pissarro saying, let's do it again. And at the downside of the paper, Yellow Greens brace for World Cup qualifiers. You can find details on page 2. Mourinho set to quit Roma. You can find details on page 3. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Alright, let's round it up with the Business Day newspaper. The big story on Business Day: Nigerian outrageous ship rating cost worsen petrol prices. With the rider, average cost in West African neighbors 5 times lower. You can find detail of that story on the front page and in the paper. Food prices still surging amid federal government stabilization plan. That is part of the big story you can read in the paper. Weaker Naira drives up foreign demand for local products. You can find on page 30. Naira hits record low of 848 son of okay, I take that. Naira hit record low of 448 naira per dollar on the official market. You can find how much the naira is to the dollar. More detail of that story inside the paper. And that's all on Business Day newspaper. Thank you so much, Rachel,
You're
for
welcome,
always doing it with me. Thank you, Mr. Shama, for calling on the program to air your view. Thank you also to all our supporters and viewers of Echo Television. To have a blessed day ahead.